Hi, and thank you for joining me for another video. Friends, today I want to talk to you about the Sanhedrin, the Beit Din HaGadol, the great court of Yerushalayim. And friends, the reason this is so important is because the Sanhedrin is where Rabbinic Judaism began and ended. In other words, within the span of time that this court sat, it was decided everything that a Jew is obligated to observe, apart from what's written in Torah Shebiktav, in the written law itself. And how do we know this? Well, friends, it's no secret that the reason we believe anything in Judaism is not because our rabbis tell us to, but rather because of Torah Shebiktav, because of the 5 books of Moses. In other words, anyone who calls himself a Jew and cannot justify everything he's required to believe from the Torah is not following Torah Judaism. And if you ask, why do I believe what's written in Torah Shebiktav, in the written law? Well, friends, that's where faith comes in. Because remember, we're still talking about religion here. But to give a short answer why we choose to take the Torah by faith and not everything else that's fed to us by others, is that the Torah, my friends, is the book that sparked the world's ethical revolution. In other words, it's because it works. And because of faith in it, we come to have faith in the one who wrote it. Because what else could we do for him? And this him is the one the world calls God. The one who really believed in us enough, who cared for us enough to give us such a set of infallible instructions to live by. Now, you're probably saying, that's fine, but what gave the Sanhedrin any authority to be followed in the first place? Because as Torah Jews, we know that people cannot just usurp authority upon themselves and expect their words to be binding without clear permission from the Torah to do so, which is the grave error many people today commit by accepting books like the Zohar and even the New Testament as authorities in their life. We have to ask the question, whoever gave these people any permission to write such books, and worse, to make them binding? In other words, friends, anything not built or extracted from the actual words of Torah or authorized by Torah itself could ultimately be tossed out and is thus useless for theological growth. Which is why, friends, that the only reason we're subject to the Sanhedrin's authority is because the Torah itself commanded it. Friends, the Torah constantly speaks of the 70 elders that were appointed as judges for the people, 71 with Moshe Rabbeinu. Now you're thinking, where does it say this? Well, regarding these judges, it states in Deuteronomy 17 that if cases come before your court that are too difficult for you to judge, whether bloodshed, ben dam ledam, between laws, ben din ledin, or assaults, uve nega lenega, take them to the place that the Lord will choose. And we know this is Yerushalayim. And go to the Levitical priest and to the judge who is in office at that time. Inquire of them and they will give you the verdict. You must act according to the decisions they give you at the place the Lord will choose. And be careful to do everything they instruct you to do. Act according to whatever they teach you and the decisions they give you. Do not turn aside from what they tell you to the right or to the left, right? Lo tasor. Anyone who shows contempt for the judge or for the priest who stands ministering there to the Lord your God is to be put to death. You shall purge the evil from Israel. End of quote. And friends, I don't think there exists a better pasuk that explains the ruling of the Sanhedrin, or what we call the bulk of oral law, than this one. And honestly, it's also a bit hard and absurd to assume that from the giving of the Torah, everyone was expected to decipher the Almighty's ceremonial laws through their own personal, independent interpretation. As a matter of fact, the notion never, not even once, appears in Torah. And like I'm showing you today, that actually the opposite is true. And if Deuteronomy wasn't clear enough, 2 Chronicles 19 verse 8 just reiterates what we just read. It states, in Yerushalayim, Jehoshaphat appointed the Levites, priests and heads of Israelite families to administer the law of the Lord and to settle disputes. And they lived in Yerushalayim. He gave them these orders: you must serve faithfully and wholeheartedly in the fear of the Lord in every case that comes before you from the people who live in the cities, whether it's bloodshed. Now again, it's the same word as Deuteronomy 17, ben dam ledam, or the concerns of the law, commands, decrees, or regulations. And here, my friends, it just amplifies the laws that it was referring to in Deuteronomy 17. It says, Bein Torah, le mitzvah, le chukim, ul mishpatim. It's the same words, the exact same words. It says, you are to warn them not to sin against the Lord. In other words, by not following the decrees of the court, you would be sinning against God. Otherwise, his wrath will come upon you and your people. Do this and you will not sin. So friends, it doesn't get clearer than this. In other words, there's no way someone could claim that the role of the great court was only there to adjudicate between civil disputes, but as this verse clearly explained, that it was responsible for all types of Torah law, which is why the Rambam states that it is this court that was in charge of creating and maintaining Gezerot, Takanot, Minchagim amongst the Jewish people. In other words, decrees, edicts, and practices, which is really the only way halacha applies to us today, unlike what your rabbi may have taught you, which is actually the ammo that Karaites and Christians use against those of us who believe in an oral law, that in some way everything that's in the Talmud, including the teachings of our rabbis today, are in some way oral law. Not at all, friends. Actually, the only thing that we Jews consider oral law is the final rulings of the great Sanhedrin and a few certain essential scriptural clarifications that we believe were given along with the written law on Mount Sinai. And that's it. And all this could actually be obtained in one work, in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah, my friends, which is the complete codification of the whole oral law. And just in case someone may have misunderstood me, we don't follow the Rambam, and the only reason his name is quoted is because he was the only one to ever codify all of Jewish law in one work. Again, that's called the Mishnah Torah, or the Yad HaChazaka. In other words, he compiled all the final rulings of Chazal, those who sat in the great Sanhedrin, so that we would not have to waste our time going through countless Talmudic arguments to finally know their final rulings. Because even before his codification, the Talmud was never a book that was meant to be studied by individuals who were not first familiar with the practical halacha, which is, if you see, is the way that it's studied today. The problem with this type of study is that many, because of lack of knowledge or time restraints, will end up creating false doctrines because they'll fail to follow the arguments through and actually find out what the final ruling was. Which is why even the Rambam himself wrote that once you have the codification of the Talmud, which is the Mishnah Torah, you will never have to study Talmud again. Unless after learning the practical halacha, you just want to know where that law actually derived from and through what debate. And you're probably thinking, how could such an authority be given to humans and expect them not to stray? And friends, one thing one must know before trying to understand the Torah is that every human depicted within it was fallible, including those who sat in the Sanhedrin. As a matter of fact, the Torah specifically states in Exodus 23 that when referring to the rulings that this court will produce, that we should not follow the majority to do evil. In other words, it tells us that we should follow them to do good. In other words, that if you feel that the ruling is blatantly going against the instructions of Torah, you don't have to follow. Now, mind you that the Sanhedrin was made up of 71 of the greatest scholars that Israel had at any given time, and their final rulings were left up to a vote, so the chance of mistakes were slim. And even with these percentages, they still happened, as you can read if you study Chachot Shegagot in the Mishnah Torah or Masechet Haroyot in the Gemara. And remember that this court only ruled on areas that were not completely clear in the Torah, because we still have a clear commandment not to add to the commandments in the Torah. In other words, they weren't just making up laws. So you're probably thinking, how about the rabbis today? Do they hold any authority? Well, friends, what most people don't know is that even the title rabbi that we have today is really only a ceremonial title. For the original title rabbi was only reserved for the members of the Sanhedrin, who were ordained through an unbroken chain going back all the way to Moshe Rabbeinu himself. So those who call themselves rabbis nowadays, including myself, really only have minimal authority to resolve such things like financial disputes between litigants and the like, but not in any way have any authority to change or add any halachot. And one thing that most people do not understand regarding the Sanhedrin's rulings is that they never ruled on ethical law, but only ceremonial law. In other words, their laws were ultimately limited to areas that required clarification and not ethical edicts, which are the foundation of Torah and the foundation of ethical monotheism. and was also the standard we even see pre-Sinai characters being rewarded and suffering from. Now, an ethical law could have attached to it ceremonial laws that describe how to perform it in a unified manner. For example, the command to honor one's parents. The command that we even see Yosef Asadik paying for before an actual explicit command was ever given. So the command to honor your parents is the ethical command, and the limits for the sake of structure and unity is the realm of the rabbinical command. And even this rabbinical command could not in any way contradict the Torah, to the point that Israel has always referred to these rabbinical clarifications as rabbinic commands and never Torah commands, lest we make our own words Torah themselves, God forbid. And also, our oral law could not encompass anything mystical or even attempt to describe areas like the complexity of God. Basically, because what Torah clarification could they be providing, and on what Torah basis would they be building their outcomes on? When the Torah explicitly states in Deuteronomy 29 that the hidden things are for Hashem and only the revealed things are for us. So let's not waste our time. And this is not just a formula, but could actually be seen and tested in codified halacha. And when I say codified halacha, I mean the rulings of Chazal, which are those who sat on the Sanhedrin and not the modern day rabbinical books that rabbis today have begun to erroneously call halacha also. And I'm especially not referring to the words of those people erroneously called Gedolim, or the modern day pagan concept created this century that people call Das Torah. Two notions that were fabricated by rabbis themselves only to wield the power that really only the Sanhedrin had. And also, friends, I can't forget to mention the pagan idea of the Tzaddik nowadays. Because whereas the Gedolim, they follow blindly the so-called Tzaddikim they worship. Now, this is regarding the modern day concept of a Tzaddik, which is how rabbis teach someone who does not sin or who does not make a mistake, and not the actual concept as explained in the Mishnah Torah as one whose good deeds outweigh his bad. Because, friends, it's your responsibility to stay on the track of pure Torah and not fall into any trap the mystical rabbis of today have formulated, especially when regarding the oral law. In other words, anything that does not either build up or confirm what's written in Torah Shebiktav, the 5 books of Moses, is not binding on anyone. And when I say build up, I mean with Torah concepts only, which is why the Rambam states that the oral law, the mitzvah, is always only a commentary on the written law. In other words, it needs to have a basis to build on and not go off on its own tangent like modern day rabbinical works have done so, describing things that are above and below and the supposed secrets of God. Such idiots. And friends, it even states in Parashat Bechatlotcha that the Lord said to Moses, "Bring me the 70 elders who are known to you as leaders and officials among the people. Have them come to the tent of meeting, and they will stand there with you. I will come down and speak with you there, and I will take some of the power of the Spirit that is on you, and I will put it on them. They will share the burden of the people with you so that you will not have to carry it alone." You understand, friends? This, friends, alludes to the notion that although these men were fallible, they were gifted with what Moses had. And this is not some special power, but ultimately the approval of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself, which is really what pushed me to make this video in the first place, to try to explain the most unexplored biblical office, and that's the office of the judge. And friends, it's actually been so unexplored that groups like Karaites and Christians even say that their authority was made up. And it's not completely their fault because, like I just explained, most Jews today also don't understand what rabbinic Judaism is. Because honestly, how many times have I heard stupid rabbis say silly things that we're not Torah Jews, but we're rabbinic Jews? What stupidity, friend. We are first and foremost Torah Jews, and everything else that doesn't either build up or confirm what's written in the 5 books could be disposed of. And you could even tell them that I said it. And just for clarity, I have to mention how this new Sanhedrin that was just established in Israel has no power, and this is clearly not the Sanhedrin I'm referring to in this video. So now, you're probably thinking, how does this apply to me today, and where should I start? Well, friends, all you need to do our Creator's will and repair the world at the same time is Torah and what it commands us to follow. In other words, only a Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, and a Mishnah Torah, the codification of the oral law. And everything else is secondary and regulated to commentary. So again, all you need is a Torah and a Mishnah Torah. And honestly, I would say that the main reason the Almighty himself instituted this way was for unity. Because friends, if we're not unified, we're useless. And if the Torah's ethics and commands are not understood uniformly, then it's useless. Ultimately, because repairing the world, my friends, is a team effort. So the ceremonial rulings of the Sanhedrin were only legislated by the Torah to keep us all on the same page, in the same team, so that we, in a unified manner, can have an impact in this world for the better. If you're hearing me today and you're either a non-Jew or an unaffiliated Jew and you want to join this team of those who follow Torah, please go to torahjudaism.org, and there you receive more information on returning to Judaism or converting to Judaism. And for everything that has to do with Judaism, please go to bejewish.org. Thank you.